Good day everybody, my name is Awesomecrunch and welcome to another video on Subnautica Below Zero. Now this episode we're going to be doing something slightly different. Everyone knows that one of the main attractions of the Subnautica series is the scale of some of the creatures in the game. Whether you're talking about the vent garden or the glow whale, there are plenty of massive creatures to feast your eyes on. However, despite both Subnautica games being absolutely incredible, the series does suffer from a few problems, which means that the game's creatures aren't shown to their fullest potential. In this video, I'm hopefully going to show you guys the real scale of some of Below Zero's creatures, many of which might just blow your mind and change your whole perception of the game. I'll be sure to do one on the original Subnautica as well if you want me to, so feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Leave a like if you do go on to enjoy it, and subscribe for more in the future if you're feeling really generous. As you'll know, Subnautica Below Zero is played through a first-person perspective, meaning we don't see the body of our character from the outside, we only see through their eyes. While this is great for immersion, and is actually often the preferred viewpoint for many gamers, it really does a disservice to some of Below Zero's coolest creatures. With a third-person view, it's much easier to make comparisons of your own character to the scale of the surroundings, but with first-person, the limited field of view often leads to creatures looking much smaller than they really are. Hopefully in this video, I'll be able to show you guys the real scale of some of Below Zero's best creatures, which might just make you appreciate the game even more than you already do. I'm going to do most of the creatures that are in the game, but there will be some that are missing from this list. If they are missing from this list, it's because they're just not significant, because they just look how they are. Okay, so first up we have the newtfish. Now, finding out about this one was probably the biggest shock to me of all, because I just did not expect it at all. Now, you'll know if you've played the game that the newtfish is just a creature that goes around, it has an expandable jaw and stuff like that. It looks pretty mid-sized. I mean, as it's just swimming around, it looks pretty normal. For example, if I just spawn another one over here, they look pretty small. There's nothing really that significant about their size. But if you go into free cam, it is actually quite scary. So you see here, they're longer than the length of the player's arm, and by far bigger than the player's head. Whereas when you play in the game, it really doesn't look that way at all. This isn't the best way of looking at it, because this game is just infuriating trying to get the player model to line up with the creature, but I'm trying to give you the best idea of what the actual scale is here. They're not that far away from each other, and yet the newtfish looks absolutely massive. So the idea of its mouth being able to open up, I mean, it would be able to swallow, if you think about it really, it would be able to swallow Robin pretty much whole. You can actually pick newtfish up, which makes no sense. Right, so I've equipped it in my left slot, and there you go. Here we are holding it with one arm, one hand, like it's absolutely tiny. That was the thing that confused me so much about it. You see, it doesn't look that big. It really doesn't. So the next creature we're going to look at is the brute shark. They're a pain to swim around, but they don't really look that big. So that's not the best example because it's just randomly placed on top of the brute shark. But even still, you can see the brute shark could very, very easily rip you in half with just one bite, and probably honestly swallow you in one. But seeing how massive the brute shark is in comparison to the person, it's insane. Right, this one might work. I've not seen this one personally, so I don't know what the size comparison is like, because there isn't one on the wiki. But look at this again. The Cryptosuchus is absolutely huge. You could easily be eaten in one bite by that. And yet, as soon as you go back to free cam again, it doesn't look that big. I mean, obviously it looks big compared to the other creatures around it, but it really doesn't look like it could swallow you in one bite. It sort of just looks like it could give your head a nibble, and that's the most damage it could do. See, now this is the thing, because for some of them it makes sense. The penguin, I would say, looks about right. That's about how big I was expecting it to be, because I don't know if it's to do with being on land and looking down at it, or something about it just makes the penguin look sort of right. I mean, I don't know if you knew that the penguin was about 5'7", or however tall Robin is. They're massive, but I think it makes a bit of sense for these. So from what I've seen, the rock puncher is another example of a creature that looks about right, and I think you can agree with me there. It does. It looks about right. Right, so the next example I'm looking for is the snow stalker. So again, snow stalkers are absolutely huge. Could easily grab you and eat you in one bite. I mean, their snout is about as long as Robin is tall, maybe a little bit less. And their paws and their claws are absolutely ginormous. I mean, we'll have a look at the snowstalker baby as well, just to get a comparison. I mean, even the babies are pretty big. I mean, they come up to about Robin's hip. And then when you go out of free cam, back into the game, Snowstalker sort of looks medium-sized and the baby looks absolutely tiny.
Warning. Passing 100 meters. Oxygen efficiency decreased.
I did not know the AI voice was an Indian voice now. That's cool. That's how long I haven't played the game for. That is mad. That's cool. Right, so next up we have the Arctic Ray. I've just spotted one over here. Right, okay, so I've managed to line up pretty well with an Arctic Ray, and there you go. They are huge. They're longer than Robin is tall. And their wings, or whatever you call a rays, I suppose they are wings, aren't they? They are huge. I mean, the wingspan on these things is massive, and then the eye is about the same size as Robin's head, probably. I mean, you could easily ride one of these things. And then, yeah, as soon as you go back in game, they're back to being sort of normal size, what you'd expect. They don't look anything spectacular. It's really, really strange. So another one that I noticed that might be a little bit off in terms of how well you can see its actual size is the arrow ray, because like the newtfish, this is another fish that you can actually hold. You see that? I mean, they're not anything spectacular. It's not like the Arctic ray, but they are pretty big compared to Robin. You wouldn't be able to hold that in your hand freely. It would definitely be able to pull you along. It's a pretty big fish, and yet you can hold it just like that, just in your hand. Doesn't make any sense, but it's another example of just a normal creature that you'd find in this game. It just doesn't make any sense in terms of its size. Right, so here we are. This is obviously not how it's supposed to be in the game. I've just spawned it in. But if we just put ourselves, say, just in line with the leg here, how the size instantly becomes more noticeable. The spiky trap becomes a bigger threat just from the size of it, because you could clearly just swim into its mouth and it would just digest you, and that's the end of it. It's absolutely massive. It doesn't look like that much of a threat. You can just sort of swim down to it, and your feet are sort of just slapping the top of it like nothing's happening. But then you go out of it, and you're absolutely tiny compared to it. It's just a further example of how messed up the field of view is in this game. Right, okay, so next up we're going to be looking at the Lily Paddler. I haven't seen this one myself. I get the feeling that they're actually pretty big, but only time will tell. Again, Lily Paddler is pretty big. The head is pretty much all of Robin's torso, probably down to her knees again. I mean, even its arms are about the same length as Robin's legs. Pretty much on point there, actually. And yet when you come out of it, they don't look that big at all. It's really, really messed up. So the Titan Hawfish is another example of one that sort of makes sense because you have to be able to swim through it, because that's just one of the features of the game. I would say the Titan Hawfish looks about right. Now, we don't actually have proper measurements for every single creature in the game, but for the Leviathans especially, we do have accurate measurements. So I'm going to try and put them into a way that you can imagine how big they would be in real life for you. I don't know how well it's going to come across, but you'll just have to let me know. Right, so now we're moving on to the Leviathan class creatures. Jesus, that was loud. I'm going to try and tell you the dimensions of these creatures in a way that you might be able to imagine exactly how big they actually are if they were in our world. First one we're looking at is the Chelicera. Now there's a really, really good picture of this on the wiki, which I'll show you now, which shows how massive the Chelicera is compared to the player. Right, so it's not perfect, that's granted, but you can just see how huge the Chelicera is compared to the player. Now, if you think about the attack animation of the Chelicera, where it grabs you with its 4 mandibles or claws or whatever you want to call them that surround its mouth, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense for Robin to be this small compared to it, because it grabs you with all 4 of them. I feel like you'd pretty much be able to slip through this gap here and just go right into its mouth. Just for a bit of human scale, the Chelicera comes in at the size of 2 and a bit London double-decker buses. So if you were standing on the street and looking at 2 London double-decker buses back to back, they would be about the length of the Chelicera. And another incredible fact which I figured out while researching this creature is that if you stood it on its tail, it would be about the same height, if not a tiny bit taller, than the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. So if you've been there, and I'm sure you can see in the pictures, it's absolutely massive compared to the people. That is just how big the Chelicera is. Another example of a Leviathan is the glow whale, which is of course 4546B's version of a whale. Showing it with the player model, you could very easily be swallowed by this thing, and this comes in at about 30 meters, so 10 meters shorter than the Chelicera. It's 3 meters smaller than the longest blue whale ever measured, but it is longer than the average blue whale, and blue whales are the largest creature on Earth. So that's a bit of perspective for you there. Glow whales are massive. So next on up we have the Iceworm. I figured the best place to come and have a look at this guy in its full length would be to come to the debug area, which if you don't know you can get to by typing in go to Iceworm debug area. So I've managed to get him to come out of the ice. This isn't really the best way of looking at it, but there's the Iceworm. He's just stuck his head into the floor, so if I can get a size ref to spawn just there, you can see how tiny the person is compared to them. In fact, if we can get a size ref to spawn up here, it's said that the Iceworm is about 95 meters long, which is about the height as the Statue of Liberty, including the pedestal that it stands on. So if you were to get an Iceworm to stand on its tail and point vertically upwards, it would be about the same height as the Statue of Liberty, which, if you've been there, you'll know is massive. Again, another example of how massive even the Juvenile vent gardens are compared to Robin, who is absolutely tiny. They are 20 meters long, just in case you didn't know. So there's Sam. I mean, you can already barely see her. So seeing the vent garden at its full 110 meter size, you can just about see Sam. And she's not even taller than one of the little suction pads on the bottom. That is how massive a vent garden is. Right, so I've spawned a Shadow Leviathan, because this is the next one we're looking at. These guys measure in at 60 meters in length. You can really see here how absolutely tiny Robin is compared to the Shadow, and how easily it would be able to eat you with its whatever you want to call that mouth. Shadow Leviathan, which comes in at 60 meters, is about the length of two Boeing 737-700s, which I'm not a plane person, I don't know what they are to be honest. They're just your average plane that you'd travel on. Also, if you've ever been to London and you've seen Nelson's Column, if you stood the Shadow Leviathan on its tail vertically upwards, it would be about the same, if not slightly taller, than Nelson's Column. The frozen creature has to be probably the coolest creature in the game, and it is absolutely massive. But the only problem with getting a really accurate size comparison is the fact that it's lodged in a block of ice, and as far as we know it doesn't have a spawn command, so you can't spawn it in the void like you can with a vent garden. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to try and do my best. So just for a bit of background knowledge, the frozen Leviathan, including its tail, which is how you'd measure most creatures I would guess, measures in at 150 meters long, which is 40 meters longer than the vent garden is tall, so you could fit a vent garden in here, plus probably an extra half of a vent garden, and it would still not be as long as the frozen Leviathan. This is probably the only view we're going to be able to get of it, because of the way it's lodged in the wall, but you can see, just from the fact the tail's poking out of the cave, how long it really is. Okay, so I spawned the size ref on the bit of the surface there, and I'm going to zoom out all the way so you can see the entire creature in its full. Then there you go, you can barely see the size ref. If the frozen Leviathan was here on Earth, it would be just under the length of two Antonov AN-25s, which are the biggest planes ever made, so two of them, just over the length of two Airbus A380s, which are probably the biggest commercial plane you'd fly on, I guess. About 11 school buses, standard American school buses, so 11 of them. If you stood it on its tail and pointed it vertically upwards, it would be just a few meters shorter than the Washington Monument. And it's about the same length as the height of the Spring Temple Buddha in China, which is a massive statue. So it's insanely big. He could eat humans like whales eat krill and plankton. Just open the mouth thousands of them flooding in, and he wouldn't even notice. So I think we can just be thankful that the frozen Leviathan is frozen. Also, just wanted to thank Bippity and Ray from the wiki, because they helped me with working out how to do these size comparisons. Sorry if this hasn't been the most exciting video, and obviously I'm sorry if the size comparisons weren't very good. But obviously this is my first time doing this. If I do end up doing one on the original Subnautica, I'll work out a better way to do it. But yeah, hopefully this video has sort of just given you guys more of an appreciation of the actual size of some of the creatures in the game that the field of view effects sort of ruin. Obviously if you disagree with anything I've said in the video, like whether you think they do look alright or whether you think they do look bigger or smaller than they actually are, let me know, because I'm interested to know what you guys actually think about this. But yeah, I'm going to leave this one here, guys. If you did enjoy the video, please subscribe. If you're feeling really generous, subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Ciao, my friends.